utilitarian too. So he's appealing to utilitarian principles. But notice he didn't answer the question. The question was, how do you judge? How do you figure out overall, given all of the actions that are involved by religious people, what the net balance is? I think this is what philosophers like to call an imponderable. I mean, there's so many things that you have to consider. The question is whether or not you're going to concentrate on the negative ones or whether you're going to concentrate on the positive ones. I'm really not sure what the overall value is.
So then that's a follow-up. That's more like a follow-up question. Can I just address that?
Yeah. Sure. I'll address that, and then we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You judge with investigation and with reason. You use your mind. You compare the relative merits of the consequences of the various actions that you're considering, and you say, if I dump this chemical in the river, what happens close to this chemical? If I do this or that, you, to the best of your ability, which means being as informed as possible about the consequences of your actions, you make a reasoned opinion, an informed opinion about the course that you should take, which results in the minimal amount of harm. You can't avoid all harm. So that's how you do it. You use reason, you use kindness, you use your mind, you use facts, you use evidence to try to come to an informed decision about the choices that you're making with your ethical options. But my question to you is, what is religion? Define religion.
Let me answer the question about religion in this way. Dan claimed that religion was irrelevant. At best, it was a motivational thing. And he's now claiming that it's irrelevant with regard to ethical reasoning. It may well be for some people that it is irrelevant, but I'm not convinced that that's the case with everybody. I mean, Dan seems to be saying that it could be irrelevant, and therefore it should be irrelevant, but the question that I have to be worrying about, since I have to come up with a definition of religion if I'm going to answer this, is religion really something that everybody can get rid of? Religion is a tricky notion in philosophy. In philosophy of religion, we worry a lot about how we might go about trying to define it. Sometimes we do it just simply by paradigm examples. Other times we appeal to attempts by people like the late William Alston to try to come up with religion-making features, and Alston comes up with a list of about 9 features, of which I could only remember about 5. But things like gods, or gods, or God, or gods, rituals, sacred objects, ethical principles sanctioned by an appropriate source, and a community that is adhering to all of the above. And if you think of religion in that way, if you happen to be somebody who views his or her identity essentially as being part of a religion, the religion really isn't irrelevant. And motivation is important. It would be nice if everybody really had great power over what they could believe and what they could choose to believe. But as I will be arguing later, I think that freedom is largely an illusion. So I think for most people, they find themselves in a religious context, they're unable to question it, and so they find themselves adhering to the principles that are handed down to them in that religious context.
Any other questions for Mr. Barker?
Dan makes a big list of religions being untrue, divisive, causing war, being opposed to science. Sounds like he's also going after politics to me. And I mean, I guess part of the problem is there are lots of things that are untrue, divisive, cause war, and are opposed to science. And yet, like political parties, like advertising, there are all kinds of special interests that try to manipulate us in various ways. If we're interested in maintaining a pluralistic secular society, the question is, do you want to get rid of all these things, or do we have to figure out some way of living together? And I guess I'm saying, even if religion were untrue, and yes, sometimes it is divisive, does it have to be divisive? That Dan claims it essentially is. I'm not sure it is. How do you know that it's essentially divisive? It's true that if you pick a particular time period, you find nothing but division, but if you pick another time period, you find attempts to try to be ecumenical, don't you?
Okay, a couple of questions here for people in the back.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Well, the progress that has been made with tolerance and religion really is owed to science, not to the religion itself. The religions themselves, the teachings of those religions are inherently divisive. They are the saved versus the unsaved, the chosen versus the Gentiles, they're the elect versus the damned. There's the we special ones versus those outsiders. And you can't deny that all through history that divisiveness, that in-group, out-group, has contributed toward that sort of tribal mentality of us versus them, which creates that social conflict. And no one can deny the history of religious wars and fights and divides, even within religious. I know in the Church of Christ there was a big split over whether or not the communion cup should have a handle. And they had a big fight over that. I mean, there's something about religion where you feel like you are the special. And your definition of religion is so broad that it may as well just be a philosophy. If you're talking about religion itself, and you mentioned an appeal to something transcendent, religion, as I understand it, is a system of belief and or practices that recognizes some metaphysical higher meaning outside of the natural universe in some way. That there is some metaphysical, either a being or a mind or a god or demons or whatever, or something that transcends us in a real supernatural way that gives us some kind of meaning from outside. And when you try to articulate what those things are, you come down with rules and regulations. And even you mentioned in your definition of religion that is, I can't quote you exactly, but subscribing to some ethical principles as established by some, did you say authority, or by some sovereign?
Appropriate source.
Appropriate source. Okay, so in most religions, that appropriate source is the commands of the deity, the commands of the dictator. You're following rules rather than thinking for yourself. And there's a danger in religion. When I did a debate with Dinesh D'Souza a few weeks ago, have you heard about Dinesh in the news recently? In fact, I met his, I thought it was his daughter, it was his fiance, actually, turned out. I asked Dinesh during the debate, since you say that morality comes from the commands of the God, then let me ask you, Dinesh, if God told you to kill me, would you do it? And Dinesh said, well, if I were sure it was the voice of God, then I would have to. He said that before those 2,000 people. So that's a religious teaching. If religion is subscribing to the views of some authority or some source up there, then you're basically turning off your mind to some degree and not thinking for yourself. And there's the danger that you don't think for yourself.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up our cross-examination unless there's any other pressing issues. What we will do now is move to the affirmative rebuttal.